Okay, we're going to talk about culinary herbs today, and I've been chatting with a few people here in the audience, so we'll just kind of zip right into it. Culinary herbs would be herbs that you use mostly for cooking, but they make excellent landscape plants, and they also make excellent container plants. So, oops. Okay, there's a number of different ways that you can grow herbs, and one of them is in a dedicated herb garden. Dedicated herb gardens, there's a number of really fabulous ones in this area. One of them is at the University of Washington Medicinal Herb Garden, and that is on the UW campus. If you visit on Sunday, you don't have to pay their huge exorbitant parking fees. And but before you go, look up where it's at, and because there's always construction going on there, and you'll just drive around and go, oh, there it is. So anyway, this is the Medicinal Herb Garden. They have probably hundreds of different varieties of herbs. They're very well marked. If you bring children with you, don't let them taste, because some of these medicinal herbs are could be toxic for small children. But they are just, this is a fabulous garden to visit, and it's a great resource in this area. Another shot of that, and it's just peppered with signs. It has the botanical name and the common name of each plant. This is Bastyr College in Juanita, and they teach alternative medicine there, and their garden is organic, and they use the food that they grow in that garden for their cafeteria. And the raised beds grow a variety of medicinal herbs, and you can go in, park in their parking lot, and go on a little self-guided tour. This was a number of years ago, and then I visited this last summer and went, wow, when did they build all those? But they still have the same raised beds. There's usually, especially on the nice days, there's somebody out there, so if you have questions, there's somebody there that can just tell you about the herbs that they are growing. A lot of really nice new beds, and as you can see, there's a lot of students and gardeners there. This is the Bellevue Urban Demonstration Garden that the Master Gardeners have in Bellevue. It's on 16th Street between 156th and 148th. If you go on 156th, the State Patrol office is there, and the speed limit goes from 25 to 35, and there's always somebody there. So just watch the speed in that area. And this is their herb garden, and this one was put in, probably 10 or 15 years ago, and the cottonwoods around it have grown up, and so it's shaded, so they've had to move some of the herbs to sunnier areas. And this is a couple of years ago, and as you can see, there's lots of mint and a lot of sweet cicely. Those are herbs that tolerate more shade than the run-of-the-mill culinary herbs do. This is their new herb bed here, and everything is marked with descriptions of the different varieties that they use and that are available for, you can probably go in and maybe ask for a little taste every once in a while. And they have a fall harvest festival usually in September, and they also have classes every Saturday from, I think, 10:30 to noon. They'll be starting up again in February. So every Saturday you can look on their website and find out what different classes they have. But as you can see, these are raised beds, and this is in full sun. This is a demonstration garden in Pierce County, and this is their herb bed, also a raised bed in full sun. This is Neely Soames' house in Kent. The Master Gardeners do the gardening there, and this is the herb garden very early in the spring. This is a little bit later in the spring. And it really does fill in, and it's just really quite lovely. Neelysomes is one of the pioneer families, and everything in the garden is geared all the plants there are plants that could have been grown when the house was built, 1910, 1920. So it is a heritage garden. This is the front of the garden. I just thought I would show you this because they have a 100-year-old wisteria vine there, and it grows all the way around the front porch. And it is really and truly stunning in the early spring, around Mother's Day, maybe a little bit later. So if you get a chance to get down there and see it, it is really quite gorgeous. Okay, if you're going to be growing culinary herbs, most of us have gardens with stuff in them. And it's really kind of a nice idea to put the culinary herbs in with the rest of your plants. And I'm going to show you some uses of culinary herbs as part of a mixed landscape. This is a pea patch in Bellevue, and I just happened to walk by and went, wow, that is just absolutely gorgeous. She's got chives, and she's got sage, and she's got a few other herbs there, and got some iris and some poppies and all that sort of stuff, and it's just a lovely bed. So you can certainly integrate your herbs in with a very casual kind of kitchen garden type thing. This is lavender growing at the Bellevue Botanic Garden. This isn't there anymore. They have completely redone many areas of the Bellevue Botanic Garden, and they have like a new visitor center there. So anyway, this isn't there anymore, but they did combine lavender with ornamental grasses. And I thought that was just really a lovely area, and it looked just terrific. And it would be one that would be not needing a whole lot of care, not a whole lot of watering during the summer. And it just really, really gorgeous. So. This is the Waterwise Garden at the Bellevue Botanic Garden. And this has a variety of different herbs in here. Lavender, sage, lady's mantle, chives. I think they have some oregano in there too. So they have a lot of herbs mixed in with their Waterwise garden. Okay, this is the Center for Urban Horticulture, and it's at the University of Washington. Just look up Center for Urban Horticulture. They have a SOEST garden, they have a courtyard garden, they have the Seattle Garden Club Fragrance Garden. So they have a lot of different gardens in there. It also is the home of the Elizabeth C. Miller Library, which is the largest horticultural botanic gardening library west of the Mississippi and north of San Francisco. It is also a lending library. They do loan some of their books out. And it's a fabulous resource for our area. This is one of their gardens, and this is when the lavender was in full bloom. And so they have combined it with a lot of different ornamentals, and it looks fabulous. So if you kind of want to add culinary herbs to your landscape, you can certainly do that in a way that is extremely attractive. This is Bradner Gardens Park. It's like a little pocket park. It has a little picnic area, it has a playground, it has a demonstration garden, it has a pea patch, and it has I did say playground. On the other side of this is a basketball court. And so this area is herbs, and that, of course, the basketball is going to get away from the players from time to time, and the stuff is going to get trampled, and it just perks right back up, and it just doesn't really care. So it's also rocks on this side, concrete, and then blacktop. So it kind of bakes there all summer long. So they really are tough plants, and they still look really pretty darn good. This is a different view of that same area. They have a tractor sunk into the concrete, and the kids can play on that. So yeah, this area gets a lot of traffic, a lot of activity, and the plants just do fine. This is woolly thyme used as a ground cover. So that is one solution to some gardening dilemmas of what you're going to put in an area. Woolly thyme is kind of fuzzy. It can certainly be used for culinary purposes, but it's not as flavorful as some of the other thymes. This is Corsican mint on the side. This is a tree peony on the other side. It's my tree peony. It blooms around Mother's Day. If the weather is warm, the blooms last about 2.5 days. So anyway, I have pictures of them, so I remember from year to year. But the Corsican mint makes a terrific ground cover in like a little bit of a shady area. And if your dog or cat walks on it, their feet smell like Crest toothpaste. So. But it is a very nice flat ground cover. Really nice in between paving stones. This is thyme. It's a, I think the variety is pink dimity thyme. It's one of the shorter thymes. And it is growing next to a rockery. So it gets really good drainage, it gets full sun, and it provides a nice clean edge for that area. And if the garden owner wants a little bit of thyme for in their stew or with their chicken soup, it is there. This is Iris Douglasii. This is Douglas's iris, but it is growing with sweet woodruff. Sweet woodruff is one of the few plants that will actually grow under a western red cedar, and it grows very nicely with your native plants. So it's mostly used for potpourris. It gets a little white flower on it. You can make May wine with it, and you just dry a couple of handfuls of sweet woodruff and steep that in lemon juice and a bottle of Rhine wine and a little bit of Rhine wine and a little bit of sugar, and then add another bottle of Rhine wine to it, maybe a little champagne, and make merry with it, I'm sure. So certainly would lift the spirits and create a carefree atmosphere. So it also makes a really terrific ground cover, so for one of those really awkward areas. Herbs do extremely well in containers. These are containers I've had a couple of years ago. I have decided in the meantime that I really can't handle lifting and moving around terracotta pots, so I have gone to plastic and given my terracotta pots to my son and his wife, who can still heft them around. But you can combine your herbs with ornamentals and have them right near the kitchen door. And if they get too big for the pots, you can just lift them out and plant them out in the garden. So. Strawberry pots are really terrible things to grow strawberries in. But they are really good for growing herbs in. And the reason they're good for growing herbs in is they dry out really quick, and they're nice and warm, and you can like move them into a nice sunny spot. You can take the little tiny pots of herbs and kind of slip those in as you're filling up your strawberry pot. And you can grow, a half a dozen different kinds of herbs in a strawberry pot. So if you have one laying around that was unsuccessful for strawberries, this is how you're going to use it. So. Another reason that you would want to put herbs in containers is they escape. And just confine your mint. The mint family has hollow square stems. So any plant with a hollow square stem is suspect until you make sure that it isn't going to escape and take over your whole garden bed. So these are different kinds of mint growing in tiles. And it looks really nice, and it keeps them from running all over the ground. They will sometimes grow up and bend over a little bit, and if they touch the soil, there's advantageous leaf nodes, advantageous roots that grow out of leaf nodes, and they will root in the soil and then take off from there. So kind of police the area a little bit to make sure that they don't escape on you. This is chocolate mint. It does smell a little bit like chocolate. It has a nice kind of reddish stem and a kind of dark green leaf. And this is another way to confine a plant that might get away from you, is just cut the bottom off of a grower pot, sink it in the soil, and plant your plant that could escape in that area, and it should do really well for you. Okay, herbs are generally pest resistant with a few exceptions. This is a reminder that if you're going to be growing edible plants throughout your landscape, is if you're going to be using any kind of pesticide, make sure that it's listed for edible plants. So you don't want to be using a pesticide for an ornamental plant on an edible plant. So you can go the other way, but not using pesticides that are not listed for ornamental plants. Boy, I got a double negative in there. Okay, thanks. That is the late great Harvey Darvey. So, and he was quite the mouser, and he got the moles and voles and rodents. So he would leave me presents. Okay, they are generally pest resistant with deer, except basil. Deer love basil, so you will have to keep that up and away from them. And since we no longer have a dog, we have had a group of deer kind of move in. They sleep in the backyard, and which is really kind of cool, but that means I don't grow vegetables, and anything that I value is up on the deck. So anyway, these guys were absolutely charming and so cute. Okay, slugs. Yes. Slugs are hermaphrodites, and so you only need 2 slugs. You don't need a boy slug and a girl slug. Just 2 random slugs are fine. And they mate in like August and September, and they start laying eggs towards the end of September into October. And those eggs will keep growing throughout the winter at temperatures between like 35 and 45 degrees. So if you find these, and they're about the size of seed pearls or bait, fish egg bait. So if you find these, you want to like put them in salt water or soapy water or something to get rid of them, because each of these is going to hatch into a baby slug, and they hatch hungry. This is a trap that they have used at the Bellevue demonstration garden, and it has worked fabulously well. They put pieces of wood in between the lettuce, and underneath that wood, they use the iron phosphate slug bait, and it provides a kind of a little damp, cool, shady area. And the slugs go under there and go, "Oh, you left me a snack." And it's worked really well. I have never seen them have better looking lettuce than they have had this last year. So. Okay, caffeine is a novel toxicant for slugs and snails. There was a study out of the University of Hawaii, and they were using coffee as a toxicant for snails that were eating their, I think they were growing orchids. And so you could certainly use that. If you just type in caffeine as a novel toxicant for slugs and snails, that study will pop up and you can look at it. But the best coffee to use is brewed coffee, drip coffee, rather than espresso, because it has more caffeine in it. And you can certainly spray that on the slugs, or you can kind of water your plants with your leftover coffee. So. Spit bugs. Yes. The spit stuff around there protects the little nymphs from pesticides, so it's not real effective. This was my lavender. I was like several years ago. So anyway, I went, whoa, and then I went in and grabbed my camera, took a picture of it, and then I just sprayed it down with a hose. The nymphs can't fly yet, and so once you rinse them off the plants, they're done. So yeah, you can just rinse them off, and especially a plant that's fairly sturdy like lavender, a good blast with a hose is not going to hurt that at all. So you can just simply rinse it off with water and you're good to go. This is bay leaf sucker. Okay. And they only bother Laurus nobilis, which is the culinary bay. And they kind of cause the leaves to curl up, and they drip sticky on the leaves below it, the honeydew drips. And they're just sort of messy. And those also can just be rinsed off with a hose. You could possibly use soapy water if you wanted to, but I find a hose works really well. And when my tree was like almost as tall as the house, that really wasn't an alternative for me. But I did find out that there's a little tiny bird that hangs around, and they really like these bugs. And so as soon as I start seeing the bugs, I start hearing these little tiny birds. And they make an incredible amount of noise, and they really clean off my tree. So it's like, okay, win-win, everybody. But you will have some kind of twisted leaves, and it's not that bad. So you can certainly prune those right off. This is my former bay tree, and that's a 2-story house, and it did get that high. They are pretty hardy in this area, but was that 3 years ago we had a really awful winter, and I ended up with bark splits and broken leaves, and I tried to get it to limp along for a couple of years, and this year we just finally took it out. One of the problems with the bay trees is they sucker, which for me now is a good thing, because I can pick bay leaves off the suckers now. And they get a little tiny kind of creamy yellow flowers on them, and you'll find little tiny kind of cherry type things, and sometimes they'll germinate and sometimes not. I had that tree for over 20 years, and I only had a couple of seeds germinate. They're usually propagated from cuttings, and apparently they are fairly difficult to propagate, but you could certainly give that a try. With the little root tone, and do that like probably, I think this time of the year would be a good time to try propagating bay laurel, but maybe, and give that a try, but just be aware that they're difficult to propagate, and that's probably why they're as expensive as they are. But they're not nearly as expensive as, you know, the jars that you buy of bay leaf. So. Okay, what's the difference between a spice and an herb? An herb is the leafy part, pretty much, and a spice is everything else. The seeds, the bark, the roots. So. Or in cilantro, it's both. Cilantro is the leafy part, coriander is the seed. So. It's a true annual. I was talking to somebody else here, and coriander or cilantro is a very fast cycling annual, and it is a true annual. Annuals are plants that complete their growth from seed to seed within one growing season, and cilantro will probably do that within 6 weeks to 2 months. So you plant a cilantro seed, at the time it comes up and goes to seed again, only a very short period of time has passed. So you would want to plant cilantro. If you're growing your own cilantro, you're going to want to plant it about every 2 weeks during the growing season. And it does have a little taproot, so it prefers not to be transplanted, so you can seed those directly. And cilantro is very much available in the grocery stores. You can certainly buy cilantro, I think, any grocery store at all, quite reasonably. But then you end up throwing away like a whole bunch of cilantro. So if you have a whole bunch of cilantro left over, what you can do is chop it up and smush it into an ice cube tray and fill that up with a little bit of water. And then pop those out and put them in a plastic bag. And when you're making tacos or burritos or whatever, just take it out and let it thaw out as you're cooking. And then when you get to the end of cooking, toss in the thawed out cilantro. And I usually like to put in a little lime juice too to brighten up the flavors of whatever it is that I'm making. And you can certainly freeze lime juice or lemon juice too. So you have 2 little cubes that are thawing out and just throw them in just towards the end of cooking. And it would really brighten up the flavors and add a lot. And also, you're not throwing away or having cilantro turn into slime in the bottom of the crisper. There's another way too, and I'll show you that a little bit later. Okay, started at cilantro, and we're going to move on to basil. And yes, you can freeze other leafy herbs, but not basil. Basil turns black at about 40 degrees. So when you go and buy one of those little packages for $4 and you put it in the refrigerator and you get ready to use it and you go, whoa, it turned black. Basil just turns black at 40 degrees. It's a very, very tender plant. And the very back of my handout has directions for growing basil. It won't germinate until soil temperatures are between 65 and 70 degrees. And around here, if you want to seed it directly, that's going to be like July. So you would want to start it earlier indoors. And it could be, you could start like on top of the refrigerator, on a mat that heats, or in a heated greenhouse. But it is not going to, it's just going to sit there and sulk until the soil temperatures are between 65 and 70. So you kind of want to time that so you have plants that are ready to go out when the soil temperatures are warmer. And you really don't want to buy, and I know they're available in all of the stores, starts in March. It's not going to be happy basil. You're going to need to keep it indoors. Okay, very prone to stem rot, so avoid overwatering it. And you don't want it to dry out either. It is kind of a prima donna for trying to grow it. The slugs like it, the bunnies like it, the deer like it. I think probably the possums and the raccoons like it too. So you need to put it someplace where you don't have that much competition. Okay, the best of growing conditions, not too wet, not too dry, full sun, warm soil. So pamper it along as much as possible. This is the Capitol in Madison, Wisconsin, and they have 8 of these flower beds, and they're absolutely huge. And this one, the center sections here, are all basil. So they, and each of the gardeners gets one of these huge beds, and there's sort of a competition as to who can have the best annual bed there. But this one had basil, and yeah, it was just really pretty extraordinary. I went, wow. Okay, there are dozens of different varieties of basil. And if you want to grow a lot of different varieties of basil, you're probably going to have to grow it from seed. So Territorial Seed has a good selection of seeds, and they're out of Oregon, and I think they're out of Portland, Oregon. And they, They're in Eugene. Are they in Eugene? Thank you. But anyway, they're out of Eugene, and they grow seeds and have seeds for the wet side of the mountains. So their varieties of vegetables and herbs grow well for us here, rather than the big national brands that have seeds that grow really well in the Midwest. So the leaves turn black at 40 degrees, but if you get really fresh basil at the farmer's market, or if your son grows basil, and he cuts some off for you. You can keep it fresh in a glass of water like a bouquet, and just remove the leaves on the way up. Use those leaves first, and just trim it off a little bit, change the water every couple days, and eventually it will root. And you can plant those out if you want to. But it keeps very well. It can keep, up to 2 weeks or so in a just in a glass jar on your windowsill, and works really well. If you buy just, some basil at the farmer's market, or you get it from somebody that's growing it. It needs to be cut very fresh. The stuff that's been laying around the grocery store for however long it's been laying around is probably dead, and it certainly isn't going to root or suck up any water. Dill. Dill is one of the few plants or herbs that will grow in a kind of a moist area in sort of semi-shade. It also has a taproot like cilantro, so it wants to be direct seeded. It does not want to be started in a container and then planted on. And you can use just the seed heads. You can use just the ferny leaves. They're terrific in cucumber salad, dill with sour cream or a mayonnaise sauce for salmon is really terrific. And you can use just about any part of the dill plant. Parsley. It's a biennial. So what that means is in the first year it grows a little rosette, lots of leaves. The second year it sends up this kind of weird seed stalk, and that flowers. So it's going seed to growing seasons. So that's what a biennial is. And if you let it go to seed for 2 years in a row, you will always have plenty of parsley. So, parsley pretty much stays evergreen unless we have a really, really cold winter. So you can certainly leave that out in your container or in the ground. It's always nice to have a little bit of parsley. And if you have like dried herbs, and you chop your parsley, sprinkle your dried herbs in there and kind of run the knife through there again, and that will kind of liven up the flavor of the dried herbs. So it's nice to have some parsley. You can keep that nicely in a glass of water, and you can put that in the refrigerator. Keep that a little bit longer. How can a man grow old who has sage in his garden? There are a lot of different kinds of sage. The bicolor with the golden and green, the solid green, the tricolor green and red and white, and then there's a purple sage, can be used interchangeably. They tend to kind of get a little bit rangy and kind of woody, and when they get ugly, just take them out and put a new one in. So, okay, next. Okay, this is Berggarten. It's a newer variety of sage, and it has a really big leaf on it, slightly milder flavor. If you're going to be using fresh sage, it has kind of a citrusy, fresh flavor. It is not anything at all like dried sage. So you might want to have a little bit of dried sage on hand for your turkey stuffing, for that traditional flavor. But the fresh sage has just a wonderful flavor, and you can use it in biscuits, you can use it with scrambled eggs, you can use it on a little cottage cheese. But certainly experiment with it, because it has a really nice flavor that I think you'll enjoy if you give it a chance. So, next. This is Berggarten in a container with parsley and a geranium. So it really is a very pretty plant. Okay. Oh, rosemary. Okay, there's also a lot of different kinds of rosemary. Upright rosemary most of those varieties can get to be like 6 feet tall, and they're very woody. They want full sun, not very much water. The most fabulous rosemary I've seen was growing in a parking lot between the asphalt and a drop-off with a cement retaining wall. And I don't think anybody ever watered this, and it was just fabulous. It was tall and flowering and gorgeous. So it'll take a lot of neglect. I like the trailing rosemary because the needles on it are a little bit softer. They're a little bit easier to chop. And if you're going to be using rosemary like in soup or something like that, you need to take it off the stem and chop it. Otherwise, if you throw the stem in, the little needles fall off and you end up picking them out of your soup. And ask me how I found that one out. So anyway, I do like the trailing rosemary a little bit better, but it is not as hardy. Oh, this is trailing rosemary growing over a rockery, and it's Weigelia above it. Trailing rosemary, and then Kinnikinnick, Arctostaphylos ursa uva. So some of them just kind of fall off your tongue, and other ones you go, huh. Thyme, lots of different kinds of thyme. There's a thyme that has a lemon flavor to it, a lime flavor, a cinnamon flavor to it, French thyme, all different kinds of thyme. So I think you can get a good idea of what it's going to taste like by getting the scent of it. And you can certainly dry thyme. And when you go to use it fresh, just pull the little tiny leaves right off the stem and then drop them in whatever you're going to use them in. So this is a bed with probably a half a dozen different kinds of thyme in it. And it also has some saxifrage in there, which is those kind of fleshy looking star-shaped plants. Okay. And next. Winter savory, it's actually used to flavor bologna and salami. It has kind of a different flavor. It's good in chicken soup. It is not that common. It's like the bean, and they also use it as the bean herb. It's supposed to prevent flatulence after you have like bean soup or something like that. So it is an interesting herb and something that you might want to try. It does make, it can be used like for a knot garden because it's a very low growing shrubby plant. So if you want something like a little edging around a garden bed, that would be one of the plants you would want to use. So next. Marjoram. It's a type of oregano. It comes in golden, and it also comes in a two-colored, white and green, and then solid green marjoram. It's a very mild flavor. One of the first cookbooks I had said, when in doubt, use marjoram. So it's a good one to have around. It's attractive. So next. Oregano, it's another one that will escape on you. There's Greek and Turkish oregano. It's a member of the mint family. What did I tell you about mint? Keep it contained. Square hollow stem. Keep that contained. Poor soil, drought, harsh sun, high temperatures, and freezing cold. It will deal with all of those. So, yeah, and it really is a nice looking plant. You have to keep it pruned back. Okay, sweet Sicily. It has an anise or licorice flavor, and I think a lot of herbs have that kind of anise or licorice flavor. Tarragon does, basil does. So that would be one that you could use instead of those. Okay, and it also is one of the few that grows in shade. So this is at Neely Soames' house. They have this huge grape arbor, and the sweet Sicily is growing underneath it. So. Lemon balm. Anybody grown lemon balm? You didn't let it go to seed, did you? I did once. And you did once, okay. He said he let it go to seed once. So did I. This is when you would have little lemon balm seeds all over the place. So as soon as it shows sign of flowering, cut that guy off and throw it in the compost. You'll have really good smelling compost, and you won't have little tiny lemon balm plants all over the place. The next one is lemon verbena. I don't know if you remember from Gone with the Wind, but verbena was Scarlett O'Hara's mother's favorite scent. It is probably the best of all the lemon-scented herbs, and this is the only one on here besides basil that is not hardy in this area. that I talk about. It's hardy to zone 9. We are zone 8. So we get down into the 20s or 30s. We're down into about 20 degrees on a typical winter. So it is deciduous. And the leaves on them are a little bit leathery. So you'd want to chop them up really fine or dry them and then crumble them. So this is one, if you can find it, is really great. Catmint. It's used for teas. And this is like 6 Hills catmint. And it's the most ornamental of the catmints. Now there is catnip, which is the next one. Okay, this is the catmint in that same area where they, at the Bellevue Botanic Garden, in that same area with the ornamental grasses, and that also looks really great there. So this is catnip, and it has the pale pink flowers on it rather than the blue flowers, and this is the good stuff. And you can tell it by Nepeta cattaria is the name of it. So cattaria is the one you want for your feline friends, except keep it covered until it grows up, because I bought the Harvey Darvey his own catnip plant and he ate the whole thing in one day. So that is the end of the catnip plant, and then he slept for I think 2 days straight. So chives, mild onion flavor. This is very hardy. You can chop this and use it in baked potatoes or in salads. You can certainly take the little flowers off and sprinkle them on top of a salad. It looks really nice if you slice yellow tomatoes and then sprinkle purple chive florets on top of it. It's really a Martha Stewart moment. Okay, flowers are edible. And this is another thing you can do with your leafy herbs, is make a little bundle of them in the bottom of a Ziploc bag and freeze it. And you want to bundle them up really, really tight, put a rubber band around them to hold them in shape until they're frozen. Then you can take them out and chop them with a really sharp knife. And they thaw out beautifully that way. You can do that with parsley, you can do that with cilantro, and you can do that with chives. And so, yeah, it works great. Sweet cicely too, if you want that flavor. Everything except basil, the leafy herbs. This is garlic chives. It's not as purpley a pink flower. Usually they're white, but this one is light pink, and the leaves on the garlic chives are flat. Flatter, not the tubular leaves like on the regular onion chives. So. Okay, garlic. You can grow garlic in this area very well, and you would plant that this time of the year, the same time you're planting your bulbs. And there is a King County Master Gardener fact sheet on growing garlic that has all the information on growing garlic. But basically, plant it this time of the year. When it comes up in the spring, let it keep growing, and around July it's going to start looking sort of peaked and then fall over, and that's when you harvest it. So the next slide shows garlic after it's harvested. And so you would hang that to dry. And then once it's dry, you can like braid the stems if you want to, or just cut them off. And they should hold pretty well for the winter if you grow quite a bit of garlic. If you buy a big old bag of peeled garlic, you cannot freeze it just raw. You have to cook it. So frying pan, a little kind of salad oil, a neutral flavored oil if you want to use it for a lot of different purposes. And then slap a lid on that, low heat, and let that kind of fry or saute until they're kind of a little golden brown. And then you can freeze them, and there's just enough oil in there so they break apart easily. So when you're ready to make a stew or a gravy or mashed potatoes or something, you can break off part of that frozen cooked garlic and toss it in. Works great. Lavender, this is the Spanish lavender, and it has like the little bunny ears on the flowers. These flowers are not as fragrant as the Augustifolia or the latifolia is, but the foliage on it is very fragrant, and it's a very attractive plant. So next slide is lavender augustifolia is English lavender, latifolia is the spike lavender, and the intermedia is a cross between those two varieties, but there are a lot of different varieties of lavender. And I have some information on the back of your handout. There are many different kinds of lavender, some that are quite small, and then there's grosso that's 5 feet across. So you need to know what it is that you're getting in order to make sure that you have enough room for it. So one of the real problems with lavender is pruning them. I was at a talk by the owner of Purple Haze Lavender Ranch, and he was talking about them pruning their lavender down to what he called turtles. So obviously I have never pruned my lavender down enough. He said about 2 inches of green left on the lavender when you prune it. And that will keep, in theory, keep it from falling apart. This is what happens if you don't prune your lavender, but I have sort of this theory that I think some of them fall apart more than others do, because I've had people say, I never prune my lavender and it's as thick and well-shaped as it's ever been. So I'm not sure. So I would check maybe some of the public gardens and see what varieties that they're growing and whether theirs stay all together or fall apart, and maybe pick accordingly, because there are a lot of different kinds of lavender. And once it starts falling apart, you can't prune into the woody part. So you pretty much have to get rid of that lavender and put a new one in. And luckily they're not very expensive. So lavender is going to want full sun and really good drainage. The deer don't eat it. Yay! And along with the other culinary herbs. Sage, or the culinary woody herbs, sage, lavender, rosemary. The deer don't eat those. They don't eat thyme. They pretty much leave oregano alone, and they haven't gotten into the parsley yet, but early days yet for that. This is a properly pruned lavender that is just starting to grow in the spring. Okay, next. View from Purple Haze Lavender Ranch during the Lavender Festival. And that's another shot of Purple Haze Lavender Ranch.